Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this presentation on Google Business Profile Fundamentals. I am Cecilia Savajan. I am the Database Information Specialist on Travel Oregon's marketing team, and I am very happy to introduce you to our presenter today, C.A. Clark with Miles Partnership. Welcome, C.A.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thanks for joining us today. I am C.A. Clark. I'm the General Manager of the Miles Partnership Office in Auckland, New Zealand. So good morning, Atamarie from Aotearoa, New Zealand this morning. I've been with Miles for 23 years. Miles is a strategic marketing company specifically for travel and tourism, and have worked with destinations all over the world, including Travel Oregon and travel and tourism businesses to help get messages out, get more exposure for those businesses, and drive visitation. So in addition to the kind of more traditional agency services that we do, we provide support across a wide variety of Google products, which is what we're going to talk about today. So we do a number of different programs with them. And this particular program, which is part of a broader initiative from Miles Partnership, we have done about 270 times in different destinations. You can see throughout North America there, and even down here in South Pacific. About 150,000 businesses and points of interest have been audited and analyzed. And these kinds of business training programs have been attended by about 8,000 business owners and managers over the course of probably 4 or 5 years. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see in here, so we'll talk a little bit about the, there's some stats in here and some observations, and a lot of those are drawn from those 150,000 businesses that have been audited. And about 160 or so businesses that we manage directly through Miles Partnership. So let's start with Google Business Profiles. We'll talk about why is this important. And it's important because your Google Business Profile is the single most significant source of organic exposure for your business online. I'll give you a couple more examples of that. But because of the way that people tend to behave, especially as it relates to tourism and search behavior, decision-making behavior, everybody's going to start with Google. That's where people start these processes. It's where they start searching. And so by extension, this is really the first time, that sort of first impression that people are going to get of your business. So that's really one of the key reasons that it is most important. Let's pause for a second. What is a business profile? So when we're talking about a business profile, this is an example of a business profile in SERP. SERP is Search Engine Results Page. Your business profile is this sort of card that appears on the right hand side of the web page when you do a search for either your business name or for a category that your business might be relevant to. So when we're talking about a business profile, it is that card. The business profiles appear throughout the Google ecosystem in all kinds of different formats and locations and maps, on mobile, and desktop. Okay, so Google reports local search delivers over 4 billion direct connections for businesses every month. So there's a really big volume of exposure that is available for you to your business and connecting with customers. The second reason why this is important, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, is that Google is the world's most important online travel platform. 90% of travelers use Google at some point in their trip planning process, and I'm sure that's true for you as well. If you think about your own travel planning, that was from consumer research from Focusrite that looked at US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and European markets. So not surprisingly, that's how people start their travel planning process. And as I mentioned, it's the first thing that people see about your business when they search. So if they know the name of your business, or if they know a category that your business falls into, that first interaction that they're going to have is always going to be with that business profile. There's also one of the main sources of exposure for your business is what's called the local pack. If you're not familiar with that, that's where you you do a search that combines a category and a location. So like here, this is restaurants in Grants Pass, Oregon. That location could be implicit or explicit, so it can use your phone, the latitude, longitude that is reported from your phone, or you can actually type that in and say what location you want. But you add those two things together, you're going to get some numbers. So it depends on the beta that's running at the time, 3 or 4 of those businesses and a little map. So that is actually an enormous part of where your business can get exposure, is through the local pack. If we look at the factors that go into whether your business shows up in that local pack, and that's always the question that everybody wants to know, is why those 3 or why those 4 businesses, why do those show up in the local pack? This is from a company called Bright Local that has tracked the factors that go into whether or not you show up in the local pack since 2013. And if you look at that line at the top, that yellow line, that is Google Business Profile signals. And so you can see over time, starting about 2017, that became an increasingly important factor for whether or not your business shows up there. So that's the completeness of that profile, whether or not it's verified, how many reviews, photos. We'll talk about all of these different things. So all of those signals from Google Business Profiles account for over a third of the reason that your business shows up or doesn't show up in that local pack. And that, again, is an enormous source of exposure for your business in whatever category you are in. Google also reports that up-to-date profiles are almost 3 times more likely to be considered reputable, which is a metric that they track about whether or not people kind of trust the information and decide to go there. 70% are more likely to attract location visits, and those profiles are 50% more likely to lead to a purchase. So those are all really good reasons to make sure that we are paying attention to the Google Business Profile. There's not a lot here. A lot of this is really basic stuff, and you'll see when we get to the kind of the 5 fundamentals, there's not an enormous amount of time that goes into this. So if we think about this in the scope of a 15 or 20 minute, even 30-minute kind of investment in your business profile every couple of months, it's probably the best bang for your buck you're going to get. So let's take a look at what is new with Google Business Profiles. First of all, not that new, but good to remember, is Google retired the name Google My Business and rebranded everything as Google Business Profiles. So we're referring to that as Google Business Profiles today, but you might know that as Google My Business, and a lot of people continue to call it that because it was branded like that for such a long time. They also made, at the same time they made that change, they also made some enormous changes to the way that you can access your Google profile. So the app that used to be the Google My Business app was discontinued and removed from Google Play and the Apple App Store, and was replaced with 2 different edit options that is either done in the search engine result page or in the Maps app. And we'll look at those real quickly, just so we're clear on what those edit options are. So the 2 different options are in the search engine result page. You can type in the name of your business, you'll get your profile on the right-hand side, just like we talked about earlier. And then as long as you were logged in with the account that owns or manages that business profile, you'll get this block at the top of your search results. And this is stuff that only you can see because you're logged into that, but it gives you all of the tools to manage that business profile and some of the other components of that in that block that shows up at the top of the search engine result page. So that's probably the easiest way to do any of those edits, because you're seeing sort of directly both how to edit and what that looks like. So this is just some examples. There's a little short animation if you haven't played with this at all. There's some suggested, these little kind of carousel of cards about things that are suggested. I noticed that they now have like whether or not you have reviews that need to be reviewed or responded to, things like that show up in that carousel. And then this is what the editing looks like. You have a edit profile, and you have a couple of tools across the top that you can click into. So basically all of the editing now is in this sort of modal kind of pop-up that comes up over the search engine result page, and then it will give you this menu just like that will allow you to make the changes that we're talking about today. Or if you want to use that, if you use the Google Maps app, which of course many of us do, you can click on the little menu up in the upper right-hand corner there, and there's an item in there that says your business profiles, again, assuming you are logged into your phone and the app using the same account that owns that business profile, owns or manages that business profile. So you'll see in this case, there's a whole list of them in there, and then you can choose whichever one you want to edit, and you can actually do those same edits inside the Maps app. So those are the kind of the two different ways to interact with your business profile. If you used to use Business Profile Manager, this was business.google.com. There was a kind of a desktop or a web version of this, and it was bigger and it had these tabs on the right hand side, and that interface continues to exist, but it is targeted towards agency and multi-business account holders. So if you manage 20 businesses, or like we do, like Miles Partnership does as an agency, we manage hundreds of them in this desktop manager, you can still access them through there, and there's a couple of things that you can do, but unlike the way that it used to be, that is all just a series of shortcuts to that same overlay that you get on the search engine result page. So all it is really doing is collecting those business profiles, so you don't have to go search for them, and then it gives you that same kind of overlay in there. If you're familiar with the old one, which had these tabs down the side, posts and info and insights and all of those things, sadly that version of the profile manager is gone. So the desktop business.google.com is really just a collection of whatever you own. So those are the two. You're either doing it in the search engine result page, or you were doing it in the Maps app. If you are an accommodation type, hotels finally last year got access to posts. So that's called updates in here because they're trying to make a distinction between what the other business types get, posts, and what hotels are allowed to do, because they can't do offers. They can only do an update or an event. But that is a big change, because that was one of the features that hotels didn't have access to that pretty much every other business type did. So there's a quick overview of kind of some of the things that have happened in this platform if you weren't watching, and then we'll now move into what we call the 5 fundamentals. So these are kind of the 5 most important things that we want to pay attention to in the business profile. And again, as I was saying earlier, is if you think about this as a 15 or 20 minute commitment a couple times a year, that's the best value you're going to get. Those would be the best 15 or 20 minutes that you spend. So the 5 different things that we need to pay attention to. The first one is that you need to claim your business. So in Google Maps, and we'll kind of flip back and forth between the search engine result one and the Maps one. In Google Maps, you want to look for the Claim This Business button to begin the process. And so you'll see this little sort of shield down here. It says Claim This Business. If you haven't done that already, what this is going to do is confirm to Google that you are the owner or manager of that business, and then that you can therefore make more changes. You'll have access to more tools, and then when you do make changes, those will take precedence over the kind of the regular platform changes that might be coming in from your customers. So when you do that claim, you'll get this page that gives you a couple of different choices, and it sort of depends on a number of different things which method you get. So sometimes you'll get a phone option, you'll get a text option, you'll get there's a few different options. One of them is a postcard by mail, which has long been the kind of gold standard for Google Business Profile verifications. That can be a problem, particularly in places where there's maybe not mail delivery, or difficult to get that postcard through. So in the last probably 6 months, Google has tried to expand that, but a lot of the reason that it gives you or doesn't give you the phone number has to do with the kind of consistency of your listing, how long it's been around, and whether or not that information is consistent with what Google has indexed over the years. So you'll go into to claim the business, you'll get these specific verification methods, and then you'll go through whatever that verification method is. Hopefully it's one of the ones that's real quick and they send you a text with a code or give you a call. You'll answer that call and it'll give you some numbers and you type those in. So what are the things that we need to pay attention to? Hours are super critical. And hours are super critical for a bunch of different reasons. Some of this, I think, was really driven by the pandemic and the kind of unknown factor of whether or not businesses were open or closed, during that time. So there was already kind of a huge increase in searches like open now. And that's really what's happened if we look at Google Business kind of local search. Over the last few years, it has gotten increasingly specific. So we went from, restaurant, like type of restaurant to as a category, and then people's searches get more and more specific and more sophisticated, and then I want an Indian restaurant that's near me, and then we go Indian restaurant near me, open now. And that's a much more common phrase right now, is that open now, because we want to make sure that if we're going to bother to go down there or go to your retail establishment or whatever your business is, that it's going to be open at that time. So that's super critical. There's a couple other reasons to do that. So there's a message that you may or may not have seen in the Google Business Profiles, and it says updated by business X amount of time. So you can see some different examples here. It says updated by business 8 days ago, updated by business under an hour ago, updated under an hour. So there's, if you update your hours, it will display that message for a couple of weeks, letting people know that you have recently updated those hours. And to me, this is hugely important, because for me anyway, especially when there's like a holiday, and we'll talk about holidays in a minute, it's especially important to me to know that this business is updating their hours and that I can trust them. Because if I don't see that message that says updated, right, then I have to kind of question, did they really do that? Right? Is it really open anymore? Particularly when there's any kind of holiday or change in what might be expectations. So that's another reason to do that, is you get that sort of immediacy, and Google will report that you are updating your hours. And so in some cases, like what I'll do is, and I don't recommend that you have to do this every 2 weeks, but when I do it, like every couple of months, if I go in to update my listing, I'll actually go in and change my hours and just change them by half an hour and then change them back and save, so that I get that message in there that says that I've updated, unless of course my hours have changed, in which case obviously do that. So if we're going to do that, we're going to edit hours. We search for the business and we go to edit profile again, whether we're on the Maps app or on the search engine result page, and we go to business information, and then we go to hours, and then there's a number of different kind of hours that you can put in there. There's regular hours, and that's where I'm talking about making that sort of 30-minute change in order to get the save. And then there's detailed hours. There's other kinds of hours that you can add depending on your business category. So like this is an example. This probably will be a restaurant type, obviously, because it says breakfast and brunch and so forth. So you can add detailed hours for those kinds of things. And this is really good if you have stuff like takeout or online service hours. And there's a lot more of the business categories that have that. So, you can add a section of hours that goes, well, we're open physically during this time, but you can also visit us during this time, or you can also call us online or get to us online during this time. So this is sort of what the edit looks like, right? You can pick the days and you decide whether you're open or closed, and you just add those into the detail hours. And then I mentioned this earlier, the special hours. So these are like holidays, and you've probably seen these if you already have managed a business profile. You probably will have seen these emails because they send to you all the time that say, don't forget to update your hours. And it's really easy to ignore this. Particularly because let's say you're going to be open during your normal hours, right? So it sends you the reminder and it says, don't forget to update your hours. And you go, well, it doesn't matter because my hours are going to be the same. I'm not going to be closed during that time. And that actually turns out to be a mistake, because you have to confirm those hours. Otherwise, even if they're exactly the same, otherwise you're going to get this message, and you'll see this message on the screen here that in the lower part of the right-hand side. So it says open today, and then it'll say in green, right, Christmas Eve hours. That's somebody actually went in and confirmed that they were going to be open during those times, that's exactly what you want to look for, especially on a holiday. If you see that orange message, it says Christmas Eve might affect those hours. It means the business owner did not update their hours for that holiday. And so you don't have any idea whether or not they're open. And again, for me personally, if I see that orange message, I assume they're not open, because otherwise they would have gone in and updated that. So I'm always looking for that green one if there's a holiday, and there was a holiday just earlier this week here in public holiday in New Zealand. And I used exactly this thing because I needed to pick something up. And so I did a search and went to the business that had updated their hours. So really clear example of why that is important. Moving on, we can talk about categories. So one of the other important things is what categories you choose for your business, and it affects not only where you can show up, but in some cases it affects the kinds of things, kinds of features that you have access to. So this certainly isn't a guarantee, but adding categories can give you a boost and expand where your business shows up by kind of refining those. So usually when we set up the business profile, it's not super clear that you can add other categories. It kind of asks you for a category and you can put that in. There's only about 4,000 categories that Google allows. You can't use your own, you can't suggest them. You just have to use whatever it is that they have. So you choose one of those categories. And then it's always a good idea to go in and add some additional categories to try to kind of round out maybe what you provide for your business. So you can see in this one, they chose, when they set it up, primary category of organic restaurant. That's where they felt like they were really most competitive. And then they added a couple of other categories for fine dining and for seafood, and you could imagine other ones that we add in there. So there is a kind of a limit to how many you can add, but 4 or 5 is certainly fine. And again, it's no guarantee, but it does change how Google views your business. So it can influence opportunities like the local pack, right? Like if you add a category that is a popular category, it might turn out that you're more competitive in one of those categories, those subcategories, and then you can watch sort of the impact that you might be having between the local pack and in those different categories. So there's some really good reasons to pay attention to those categories. Again, just takes a few seconds to do that. Each year, Google adds or removes, right, somewhere around plus or minus 30. So sometimes it'll be a little bit higher and sometimes it'll be a little bit lower. Usually those are going to be based on, those changes to the categories are going to be based on search results and kind of failed and successful search results. So if you happen to be a business that you just don't feel like your category is right, it's not a bad idea to check it, once or twice a year and just look through the options again, type in some prompts and see what sort of categories you get, because it might be a case where you get Google has added a category that might be beneficial to you. If you're going to edit that, we look at the SERP, right? So this one has the edit profile button there. And then you can go into about, and then there's a little section in there that says business category. And you can see that one is an American restaurant where it is marked as primary. And then you can continue to add those other categories if that's what you want to do. And again, there is a limit there, but it doesn't, 4 or 5 is certainly fine. Okay, so we talked about categories. Categories can have a big effect on your exposure. Another thing that can have an effect on exposure to, depending on your business type, but also is really good for customer confidence, is what's called attributes. And so attributes are things, you'll see them in the business profile, like in-store shopping, in-store pickup, LGBTQ friendly, dine in, right? Like these are all different attributes that you can apply to your business. You can sort of think about them as being tags. If you're going to edit those, you can go into the same, business information edit, you go to more, and you can see down below the hours there's a section that says that has from the business, and that's where the attributes are. So you can see this one has categories for accessibility and amenities and things like that. Again, this is one of those cases where things change pretty frequently. So it's a good idea to check that once or twice a year and just see if there are attributes that you can apply. This is looking at the attributes for, so this one probably a restaurant. You can see kind of the overview of the different types of things that you can put in there. So we can go to accessibility, and then there's a whole breakdown of how you can answer those. So you can say, you can answer positively. There's really 3 states for that. You can answer positively. You can say, yes, I have that. You can say, no, definitively, no, I don't have that. Or you can leave it blank, which just, counts as nothing. Basically, Google goes, I don't really know. Probably not, but I don't know. So you can answer both of those depending on what you have, and you definitely want to do that if there are ones where you don't have. Like I used to manage a profile for a hotel in in Hawaii that really was not a kids kind of a thing, and so we would always go in and mark that as like, not good for kids, no, because it wasn't really suited for that kind of environment. Speaking of hotels, one of the things that if you are an accommodation type you really want to pay attention to is attributes, because hotels have hundreds of attributes, and those things are kind of fluctuating all the time, and they're really critical to how people search for your business. So a good example is dogs allowed. So if you go into Google's hotel search and you search for a hotel, as some people do, right, who have dogs and they want to travel with a dog, and they say, dog friendly or dogs allowed, if you haven't ticked that box, you're not going to show up in that search because Google doesn't have any idea whether you have that or not. So that's a really clear example of these cases where it matters a lot for accommodations, especially when you're in an environment where the highly competitive environment with a lot of other hotels in that hotel search. And then next, we'll talk about responding to reviews. So customer reviews in Google profiles are posted by users directly to your business profile. They stay with your business profile wherever it appears, and they're the source of the star rating. So that 4.6 right there is an aggregate of all of the ratings that were given to the business by the customers in the review platform. This is incidentally one of the largest. So it's actually I think Expedia and Google compete for the most number of reviews for hotels. So for accommodations anyway, there's a kind of this jockeying for which one has the most. But Google very quickly went from 0 reviews, not having many at all, and using other people's reviews to pull into the business profile, this was years ago, to having literally the most massive source of review data anywhere in the world. So this is one of the ones that is really, really critical to your business, because whether or not you go in that local pack, whether or not people come to your business, this is all really based on, heavily based on your star rating and how people perceive what that star rating is. So this is some information from a company called Uberall, which does all these really nerdy charts about how people use business profiles. One of my favorite places to get information, and they had this great analysis that said, it was trying to answer the question, is do I need to respond? Does it make any difference if I respond to the reviews? And if so, how many am I supposed to respond to? Do I have to do them all? Do I have to do some of them? Like, what is the number? And so there's a really clear answer here. That is, if you respond to about a third of the reviews that come in, so 30% of those reviews, you get an 80% boost in conversions. And that's because Google interprets your input as the owner or manager of the business communicating with your reviewers, with your customers, as a really good sign that you are active in your business and that you're paying attention to how people perceive the business, and therefore are going to be a much more likely a better answer to the search query that the user has. If you are making those sorts of interactions. And we'll see this when we talk about photos too. There's a couple of signals that Google looks for on your end, on the business end, right, that help Google to kind of prioritize what businesses it's going to recommend. So this is a real easy one. Is target about 30% of your reviews, a third of them, to reply to. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. So this is where you do that. You can do that in the search engine result page or in Maps. You can even do it right in the review if you want. And I noticed the search engine result page also has a little notifier that will tell you that you have unread reviews. So they're doing a better job of kind of telling you that there are things that you need to pay attention to. So you can reply to that. You really don't need to do a whole lot. In that circumstance, you can say, if it was a positive review, you can say, thank you, thanks, glad you had a good time. There's not like an analysis really on Google's part of what you say. But there is an analysis on kind of the frequency and whether or not you've answered those. Keeping that in mind, actually just backing up for a second, keeping that in mind, it is a public platform, right? So if you are going to answer a question, you want to, make sure that you're doing something that you would want everyone to read forever about your response. So you can easy to respond to the positive ones. There's also a whole sequence you can do about responding to negative reviews, which I'm happy to answer questions on when we get to the end if you have that circumstance. Lastly, Dan, we'll talk about uploading photos, and that is a key part of how people make decisions about your business, obviously, right? When they're trying to decide whether or not to come to your business, the ability to see what is going on in that business, what it looks like, what kind of products are there, what sort of experience, what kind of vibe does it have is kind of critically important to that. So that's certainly one reason to do that, but there's another reason to upload photos, and typically what we recommend is that people upload 4 photos a month. And that's because that is a really strong signal to Google that you are paying attention to your business profile, and that they're trying to encourage that. And so it's a signal that says that you are doing what they want you to do inside your business profile. So you can see here in this chart, right local, the businesses with more than 100 images have significantly higher exposure rates, almost 300% higher exposure rates because of that kind of frequency of data and photos coming in there. So anecdotally, for the businesses that we manage, when we add 4 or 5 photos a month, we generally see a 10 to 30% lift in exposures for the business. Again, really strong signal to Google that you are actively managing your business profile and that you have kind of the customer's best interests in mind. What kind of photo do you have to upload? It doesn't have to be professional stuff. You can do it on your phone. Just, more important that you have some sort of, plan to upload a few photos every month. You can get them, ask for your customers or take them yourself. But what we're looking for is it is a highly competitive visual environment. So what we're looking for is things that are informative and attractive. So this one on the left is a good one. It's bright colors. It's clear about where it's being taken from. It has good contrast and good framing. And then the one on the right is a picture of the same thing, but it's a bad photo. It isn't attractive. It's off kilter. The colors are sort of muddy, right? And the sign is backwards. So we don't actually know what we're looking at in there. So there's a really good example of, hey, there's a really good looking photo and there's a really bad looking photo. And it's worth kind of paying attention to that because again, it is a competitive environment. So here again in the SERP, you go back to SERP, search for your business, you have those tools across the top and you can go to add photo. Same thing with the Maps app, and you can click your way through there to add a photo. So those are the 5 fundamentals. Update your hours, pay attention to your categories, pay attention to attributes, respond to reviews, a third of those reviews, and post 4 or 5 photos for a big lift in exposure. And that brings us to the end of the kind of fundamentals part. As you can imagine, there's a lot of complex things that are going on in there. So if that sounds like a lot of things to manage, you are absolutely right. And that's why Travel Oregon has teamed up with an Oregon-based company, Local, to offer you a free way to manage those. So that platform is called the Local. And by virtue of your participation with Travel Oregon, you can get access to those tools for free and manage and maximize your Google business profile inside that platform, which kind of takes care of a number of the things that we've talked about here. You can manage your reviews and your reputation in there. You get quite a lot of data that you don't get normally. So if you want analytics and data insights into how people are using your listings, there's a really great interface, kind of a dashboard for that in there. And I'll just leave you with a couple of these quotes here from businesses that are in Oregon that have used Local that have seen significant increases, just from paying attention to and kind of managing their business profile. So that is something that is offered to you by Travel Oregon and Local. I've used it myself and I'm a big fan. So definitely recommend that you check that out. And then we do have some time for questions, so happy to answer any of those questions, but there are a couple of other ways that you can get additional support if you want. Cecilia mentioned she's going to send out some materials. There is a kind of an office hours support option that you can sign up for. So you can get a one-on-one with our team and ask some direct questions, get some things answered if you want to do that. And then there's some toolkits that are available on the industry site for Travel Oregon. There we go. Thank you for and
Yeah, thank you, CA. I don't have any active questions in the Q&A box. I can give it a moment, see if anyone wants to jump in and ask a question, but I do have one for you. I have a question that does come up rather frequently with tourism related businesses, or any business with a visitor experience. What is the recommendation for managing your hours or even your profile if you operate seasonally? Like, say I operate a you pick orchard, and maybe I have the orchard that you can bring your family to pick some fruit, and I also have a farm stand. Both are open seasonally, and the specifics of those hours could vary by year, month, even day.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of the things that Google unfortunately doesn't deal with very well is seasonal businesses and things that change. We once had a listing challenge that was I've forgotten what it was, some sort of natural resource, but it was open from sunrise to sunset. And they were like, how come that isn't an option, right, to put in there? And unfortunately, the only answer to that was you would have to go in 365 times and set a different start and end date for all of those. But you could do that. You could go into the special hours and set those that way. So that's one way you could deal with it. If you're open, at different times during different months, you could go in and set those as special hours, but it's on a per day basis. So it kind of depends on how your fluctuation is. If you really are just a seasonal business and you're open 8 to 5 during this season and then close during the other season, then the easiest answer is that you go in and you mark it what's called temporarily closed. So you can go into that farm stand, right, or the UPick listing, and you just say we're temporarily closed when your season ends, and then you come back and remove that temporarily closed when the season begins again, and then your hours will still be in there. So that's probably the best way to deal with that. The problem with having with having those seasonal hours is that you have to be open. In order to be on Google Maps, you have to be open some amount of time. So you can't have no hours and show up in maps. So the other sort of hack for that is which I do sometimes with my phony listings, is have them be open from like 4:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. So there is a time when they're open, but it doesn't ever show if someone is searching for that it's open during that time. It'll just show as closed, but it won't say temporarily closed. So that's another way to deal with that. If you want to have your listing appear all the time, which is good from an exposure perspective, but if it always says closed, right, like then it's kind of creating the idea that maybe you're hard to get a hold of. That, and who knows if you're going to get somebody call you at 4:30 to 5 a.m. right?
Yeah, good point. Also, is there any value? I know with any Google business profile, you are able to include a description of your business. Is it valuable to put hours information in there, or
That's a good point. You can. Especially if you're kind of like a UPick or something like that, you can add that to your description, because your description is a sort of free form, and you can say, sometimes we close early on Friday, or some kind of a notification in there that can give people a little bit of an idea. The only caveat to that is that the hours that are shown, right, is much higher in the business profile than that description is, and so you're not going to get the same kind of visibility on those. But that's a really good suggestions. You can kind of add that to the description if you need to.
And then I don't want to assume here, but is it important to be active on your profile in the off season? So if I'm closed for winter, should I still be adding images? Obviously responding to reviews if they come in during the off season, but adding images and maybe doing posts about the upcoming season, like just to have that activity, even if I am temporarily closed.
Yeah, and that's again one of the challenges with having a seasonal business, is that a lot of Google's metrics are about let's say frequency or pacing. So a lot of it has to do with the, how many reviews you get, what is the frequency of those reviews. Same thing with the photos, right? And that we've been talking about here. There's a lot of this that is about that kind of pacing of things. And so even though you are an off season, you're in an off season time, Google doesn't care, right, about that. And so so you're going to have to, every season, you're going to have to sort of ramp up to that again. It is pretty quick. Okay. Like they are looking for like recency right now. They're not looking for, 6 months ago, but I do think it is a good idea. Like if you're going to open in, it doesn't matter what it is. You're going to open in October, let's say, starting in September to make some posts and, start updating some things in there is going to give you a little bit of that, kind of upward tick in activity that will be a really good signal for Google. So I think that would be a great thing to do. Do you have to do that through the whole season? Probably not, but it's a good idea to keep it in mind. Same thing if you were going to open a business. Like if you're open a brand new business, there is an option in there to say opening on. And like I would start a month early or something, posting some things in there, try to get some metrics on the board before my business opened, again, whether it was seasonal or whether it was brand new.
Very good. I have a wonderful question that has come in via the Q&A. What is the best course of action if you're maintaining a business without a set location, such as a tour guide agency, which operates from many starting points? And then is this an option for Google Cards?
Yeah, having been in the tourism business and having done this program for many, many years now, this is one of the kind of stickiest problems that comes up as tour operators, because as you say, you operate out of any number of different places where you meet customers. So here's the thing, the Google business profiles, the entire paradigm for Google business profiles is based on the idea that you are a bakery or a shoe store, or you have a physical location, you have an address, you have a phone, you have a door, somebody comes during your hours and they knock on the door and they come in and you meet with customers. That's the framework of what a business is as far as Google has defined it. They allowed a situation where you could be, so we go from that into the next kind of level of thing, which would be like a plumber or a garage door service or something like that, right? Like these are places where you're not going to take your broken toilet into the plumber, they come to you, but they still have a physical address. So there's a level of thing, there's like the business that they want, and then they kind of reluctantly said, okay, well, there are other types of businesses. So they added the option to have a service area, and you have a physical location, and then you say what your service area is, and that service area used to be a radius, and now it's a whole list of like neighborhoods or districts, things like that. So you can type those in, and again, that will help you show up on maps. The third level of that they again sort of reluctantly allowed is a business without a physical location, so called a service area business only, or SAB, and that SAB doesn't have a physical address or doesn't show a physical address and only shows in the neighborhoods or whatever that you provide service in. So there's two parts to this question. I'm sorry, this is a really long one. So there's two parts to the question. The first one is, which one of those businesses do you want to be? Ideally, you have a physical address that you can use. It's not really supposed to be your house, but it can be if you have to. You can sort of decide like how much you care about somebody turning up at the wrong place. The problem with service area businesses, because that's the one where you say, I don't have a physical address, but I do service in these areas, and that's probably the most obvious one for tour operators, is that you can't have a pin on maps because your business isn't located anywhere, right? So you're missing like half of the exposures that you might be getting with people searching, because you're only going to show up in a search and result page, not in a map search, not in maps on web, or not in the app. So the ideal situation, I would say, is having a physical location that you can kind of call your office for the tour. And then you show up in all of the searches, and then using things like products. So we didn't used to have these, years ago, we didn't used to have these in the business profile, but there's a whole section on products that you can add. And I would add my tours in there. So I would put in like, there's this tour, or this tour, or this tour, or this tour. In the products section, like as if it's a menu item, right? And that's sort of how it gets presented, because that gives you an opportunity to talk about what those individual tours are. And you can kind of set the expectation that they are delivered from a different place. You can still do that as a service area business. You just, again, you're not going to show up in any of the map-based searches. You're only going to show up in search as a result page type situations. So you're limiting your exposure there. But products, the short answer, products is the way I recommend you deal with those individual activities or tour opportunities. And then you'll just have to decide whether you can, is there a physical address that you can put in there or not? And that will determine whether you are a physical business with a service area or a service area business that has no physical address at all.
Follow-up question, because I'm curious. Are service area businesses limited by types or categories? For example, if I'm a hotel, do I even have that option to have a service area?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever tried
totally
that.
Curious right now.
I don't know the answer to that. I would guess, based on my experience in the platform, I would guess that you could. The business categories will be completely disconnected from the service area business. So you can choose to be a service area business and you can choose a category. And yeah, I suppose you could be a hotel that comes to you. I'm not really sure what that would be, but
yeah,
I think you could.
I don't know.
Actually, now that you think about that, that's probably
grooming
not
would be
totally out of the
more
question,
sense,
right?
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
there probably
I mean,
is
if
a
you're
scenario where somebody brings you a tiny home or something.
yes,
stay in.
only in Oregon.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I don't see any other open questions, so I think we can wrap it on up. So, CA, thank you so much for your time. I always learn a lot in these sessions. And to all attendees, you will hear from me by email with a link to the recording and the slide deck. Yeah, good times today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Sorry about the internet drop there, but we recovered as best we could. So.
Yes, the times we live in. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.